we hope that you are going to be tuned into this presentation. We'll make it as interactive. And if you've got questions, I know you do, we'll answer them at the end. The power of hurricanes. It only takes one storm to forever change a community.
This hurricane season, count on Chief Meteorologist Chris Martinez and the only team certified most accurate for 10 years.
We promise to prepare you, give you the first warning, and be with you through every storm.
From first track to the impacts where you live, more people trust WPBF 25 First Warning Weather. #1 for severe weather coverage.
And we want to thank all of y'all for making us #1 for severe weather coverage. I know it is hard to earn your trust, but when it comes down to saving lives, we appreciate all your support in making us #1 in severe weather coverage. So let's start it off, our 2023 names. Anybody got a name on here? We've got, obviously we're done with Arlene. We've got Brett. We've got, do we have any Cindys? We got a Cindy. Do we have any Dons? No Dons. We got any Emilys? No. Franklin, Gert, Harold, Idalia, Jose, Katia, Lee, Margot, Nigel. Do we have any Nigels here? No?
Can I add a quick history about names? Is that okay with you?
Yeah, go ahead. History? Hold on, let me get through them first.
Oh yeah, go through them first. Go ahead.
Ophelia, Philippe, Rena, Sean, Tammy, Vince, and Whitney. Now this is cool because this is a question that a lot of people ask about how these names come about.
Well, just so you know, up until the 1950s, storms didn't have names. For those of you that have been around a while, they used to number the storms, 1, 2, 3, 4, unless a storm occurred on a holiday, like the Great Labor Day Hurricane of 1935, and then it was easy to name it because it was on there. Then, in the 1950s, all the men that worked at the National Hurricane Center decided that the names of storms should have actual names. And so they named them all after their ex-girlfriends and ex-wives. And from the 1950s to the 1970s, it was all female names. Until women began working at the National Hurricane Center in the 1970s, and they said, no, that's not cool. And then they started to alternate male and female names after that. That's a little history for you on that. What's that? No, that's a true story.
I know, it sounds like it's made up, right? It sounds like a joke.
It's a true story.
He's always cracking these jokes. So everyone know the Saffir-Simpson scale, right? So we got Cat 1, Cat 2, Cat 3, Cat 4, Cat 5. Obviously, Category 5 is going to be the highest on the list with winds that could be as high as 157, and Cat 1 are 74 to 95 miles per hour. So where are we now? We're early June, and this is where we're... Are you my pointer? There we go. We're early June 3rd. So we're kind of starting off the hurricane season. And I know a lot of you know that we really start to approach the peak of hurricane season as we get past August, September, October, and then we're over the hump. But the peak of hurricane season is usually September 10th. But like you'll hear us talk about, we already had a named system. We had Arlene that happened. I think this was one of the first years that we didn't have a May storm. Remember the past couple of years, we did have a May storm, but we started June 1st off with a named storm, which was Arlene. So as far as NOAA's tropical weather outlook, the averages are 4, 14, 7, and 3. Named storms, hurricanes, major hurricanes. So NOAA's going with 12 to 17, so they go with a range. And out of those hurricanes, they think 5 to 9, and then out of those 5 to 9, 1 to 4 major hurricanes. And major hurricanes are Category 3 or higher. So that's the forecast, and we're looking at 2 major players this year. You may have heard of El Nino, La Nina. We were just in a La Nina the past couple of years. Now we're in a neutral phase, but everything is showing that we're going to go into an El Nino, and that usually says that we'll see warmer in the Pacific waters, cooler in the Atlantic, and increased wind shear. And if you have heard, we're talking about El Nino years that may be a little bit less active. But there's something else that we're watching this year, and that's the above average Atlantic temperatures. So even though we're heading into an El Nino, which usually means we could see a less active season, that's being counteracted with the above normal temperatures in the Atlantic. So that's why you're going to see our near normal seasons, the average as far as right around 14 to 15 named storms. So those are the two names of the things that we'll be watching moving forward. On top of that, Glenn has been studying this thing called the LRC. It's a new way of forecasting, and it's one of the tools that we use to help pinpoint tropical systems, where they could form and when they could form. So he's going to get into a little bit about that.
We love our friends at the National Hurricane Center. We think the forecasts that are put out every year, Colorado State University too, that tells you how many storms we might have in a season is very interesting, right? They tell you how many storms we might see in a season, how many of them might be hurricanes. But my question has always been, is that useful to people? I mean, yes, people want to know how many storms we might have, but does that help you plan your vacation this summer? Does that help you plan your wedding this summer? It doesn't really give you any idea of when and where we might see those storms. So over the past 5 or 6 years, I've been working with a small group of meteorologists on a certain type of forecasting called the LRC. It stands for the Lezak Recurring Cycle, but you can remember it as the Long Range Cycle. And the way it works is this. During the months of October and November, we study certain patterns in the atmosphere. And we recognize that after a certain number of days, those patterns recycle. They occur again and again. The same areas of low pressure develop and move the same way. For example, in October, we see an area of low pressure in the Gulf of Mexico. It develops, and then it moves into Fort Myers. And we go, that's interesting. There's a little rainmaker. Then 2 months later, we see that same low again. Develops in the Gulf of Mexico, moves into Fort Myers. That's in December. Then in February, we see it again, repeating itself. And then again in April. And guess what? The next time it comes back is in June. What is June? It's hurricane season. So we already know when it's going to develop, where it's going to develop, and where it's going to go. And once we recognize and are able to put that pattern down on the calendar, we are able to tell people when we're going to be watching a certain part of the ocean or the Gulf of Mexico or the Caribbean, when we think something will develop and where it's going to go. Last year, we were 100% accurate with every landfall area we put out. For the years before that, we were 85 to 95%. Last year was our first 100% year. We forecasted Hurricane Ian to the week that it made landfall on the west coast of Florida to the northeast. So this is why we put this forecast together. This past year, in October and November of 2022, these are the 4 areas that we watched. A couple weeks ago, we saw this low go into the Carolinas. Last week, we saw this low move across Florida, brought us a bunch of rain and severe weather. We had that marked on our calendar for the forecast. This right here was Hurricane Nicole that developed last year in November and moved in along the east coast of Florida. It is part of this year's pattern, and so these are the dates we're really going to watch closely this year. And those are the areas we've highlighted for the highest risk for landfalls this year. North Carolina, part of South Carolina, east coast of Florida. The west coast of Florida, not necessarily Fort Myers area, but a little higher than that. We did not highlight Texas or Louisiana this year. We don't think that that is one of the areas we'll see the most landfalls. Here are the dates we'll be watching for this year for the west coast of Florida. 22nd through the 25th, that was that low that moved through last week over top of us. July 12th through the 15th, we'll be watching this area. August 31st through September 4th, we'll be watching this area. For the east coast of Florida, because of Hurricane Nicole, May 30th through June 3rd, that's where we are now. There's a little low, I don't know if you looked at the maps today, there's a little low over the Bahamas right now. That's the May 30th through June 3rd. We'll be watching again July 20th to 24th and September 8th through the 13th for something to develop potentially near the Bahamas and move toward the east coast of Florida. Just something to watch. That doesn't mean it's going to be a hurricane every time. It could just be a depression or a little rainmaker, but at least we know when we're watching and where we're watching. To give you an idea, I plan my vacations around this because I want to be at the station during those dates. So I've been planning my vacations around that.
And then he wants to be at Disney at the
okay.
when it's not at the station.
All right, so now that half of you are still awake, I'm going to talk about storm surge. really quickly, people always ask, what is storm surge? Storm surge is the most damaging part of a storm. Yes, winds do a big number. There's tornadoes in storms, but storm surge is the biggest life-threatening, property-damaging thing that happens during a storm. And it's kind of hard to understand because it involves a couple of different things, but really it is basically the winds of a hurricane blowing a wall of water toward the coast. Taller the wall, the farther inland that water goes. Here's a very handsome person about to explain it to you a little better. I'm First Warning Meteorologist Ben Glazer, and this is your storm short on storm surge. What is storm surge? Well, when a developed storm is out in the ocean, it does a couple of things. The low pressure center lifts the water up, but the wind is what really causes storm surge, and that's blowing forward a wall of water as it heads toward land. For example, let's suppose this Tupperware has the ocean in it, and I am the wind. As it blows forward, the water piles up. Now, let's suppose I'm standing at high tide here on the beach. That means where I'm standing is exactly where the water comes to at high tide. Now, let's suppose there's a 4-foot storm surge. This ladder is 4 feet tall, so in the same spot where I was just standing at high tide, the water would be up to here on me. How about an 8-foot storm surge? Well, let's take our tape measure and see. The ladder is 4 feet. Let's go another 4 feet. Look at that. The top of the tape measure, that's an 8-foot storm surge. Imagine how far inland that water would go. That's an 8-foot storm surge. Hurricane Ian, 14-foot storm surge on the West Coast. Hurricane Camille, one of the only Category 5 hurricanes ever strike the U.S. coast, Mississippi, 1969, 26-foot storm surge. A 2.5-story wall of water. Storm surge is very dangerous. And on that light note, on to the next graphic. Parts of a hurricane. The center of a hurricane is called the eye. All storms, hurricanes, typhoons, cyclones, they're all in the cyclone family. The word cyclone comes from the Greek mythological monster Cyclops, a monster with one eye. A hurricane has one eye. That's where cyclone comes from. They're all in the cyclone family. They call them typhoons in the Eastern Hemisphere, hurricanes named after the Caribbean god Hurricane. That's why we call them hurricanes here in this part of the world. Right outside the eye, there's hurricane force winds in the eye wall, and then you have these outer bands that help feed moisture into the storm. They feed moisture into the storm. They are called feeder bands. Thank you. I hope you see it. They feed. Thank you very much. A+. Do we have stars? We don't have little stars. Okay, A+. Yeah. Parts of a hurricane. I need a volunteer for this. So can I get my friend up here? Come on up here. Come on. Oh, yeah, you're fine. It's just a little room. I'm not really going to do anything terrible. Okay, come on up here. Come on. We're going to do the strongest part of a storm. So the strongest part of a storm is the front right quadrant of a storm. What the heck does that mean, front right quadrant? How are you supposed to know? Well, first of all, the front of the storm is whatever direction the storm is moving. If the storm is moving this way, this is the front of the storm. If the storm is moving this way, this is the front of the storm. So the front right part of the storm is the strongest part. Wherever the front is, it's this side here. Why is that so strong? Well, you have two things going on. You have the storm that's moving forward. That's got its own strength, right? But you also have a counterclockwise rotation. Tell me your name again.
Ashley.
Ashley and I are good friends. I signed her bag earlier, so we're good. You're Florida. Let's hear it for Florida. Okay. So I'm a storm, and you're Florida, and here I come. Not only am I moving forward, but I have a counterclockwise rotation. See how much power I have on that front right side as I spin and move at the same time. I'm coming around. That's why the front right quadrant is so strong. It's got the forward motion and the spin. The left side, not as strong. I'm like, hey, Ashley, what's going on? Oops, missed you there. Sorry. Front left side, not as strong. I wasn't really going to ever touch Ashley. I just want you to know it's not a child abuse thing. Okay, thank you very much, Ashley. I appreciate it. Yeah, let's give it up for Florida. So front right quadrant. Is that my part?
That's your part.
Did I do the entire part?
And you can catch them at the Improv in West Palm.
The improv, thank you. Thank you. Okay, that's my part of the presentation. Back to Chris.
We really make a great team because he's always cracking jokes, and they're always dad jokes, and I've always got to laugh at dad jokes.
I know.
All right, so what's the difference between watches and warnings? We're going to get into that. So I want you to think a watch as you've got all the ingredients to make a cake. Then your warning is going to be the actual cake. Does that make sense? So hurricane watch, conditions are favorable for hurricane winds, tropical storm winds. Hurricane warning, that's when you need to take action. That's when conditions are expected to occur.
I'm meteorologist Vanessa Vinent, and here's your storm short. We're going to be talking about watches and warnings. When a watch has been issued, that means be prepared. A warning, take action right now. Let's talk about tropical storm watches and warnings. A tropical storm watch means tropical storm conditions are possible within 48 hours, and a tropical storm warning means tropical storm conditions are expected within 36 hours. That means winds over 39 miles per hour up to 73. Hurricane advisories, hurricane watches mean hurricane conditions are possible within 48 hours, and a hurricane warning are expected within 36 hours. That means hurricane force winds, basically 74 miles per hour or even higher, meaning category 1 to a 5.
So when a hurricane is threatening, we always talk about, hey, we've got to watch for these really destructive winds to come through. But they do pose a lot more hazards when it comes to the actual hurricane. We've got to talk about flash flooding, storm surge, and also the risk for isolated tornadoes. And that's one of the biggest risks. If you've been with us the past few years, you get those landfalling tropical systems. We talk about these tornadoes that usually come on shore super quick. And most hurricanes produce weak tornadoes, anywhere between EF0, which is 65 to 85 mile per hour, and EF1, that's 86 to 110 miles per hour. And like you saw Glenn talk about, those tornadoes are likely to occur in that right front quadrant of the storm.
Hey everybody, I'm meteorologist Sandra Shaw, and we're talking about the tornadoes that are wrapped in those outer squalls around a hurricane, usually in that northeast right quadrant, and they spin up when it tries to make landfall because of the velocity and the momentum when it spins toward land. A lot of times they're rain wrapped and on the lighter side, but you can really see a clear swath of destruction in the aftermath of a hurricane if there were tornadoes there. Perhaps you remember Irma, 46 tornado warnings in South Florida alone. We were on the wall the entire time, we felt like, but for records, you go back to Hurricane Ivan in 2004, 120 tornadoes, 103 with Hurricane Francis back in 2004.
Do you all have a safe room? All right, because sometimes when we do tornado warnings, you're going to hear us say, seek safe shelter or find your safe room. So we'll all kind of know where that's at, right? It's going to be in your interior part of your house and away from windows. So everyone good with that about finding their safe room, interior and stuff like that? So, and also what you want to do is maybe have some bottled water, some snacks in case you got to be in there for a little bit of time. So with that being said, we've talked about the threats. What do you need in your hurricane supply kits? This is kind of, we know this, but you got to prepare early and get it done early so you're not rushing at the last minute. You're not at Home Depot at the last minute with everyone's going crazy with their heads cut off. So 1 gallon of water per person per day, your non-perishable foods like protein bars, crackers, peanut butter, nuts, first aid kit, medications of course, flashlights, batteries, and chargers.
Don't let your children pick all of your hurricane supplies. My hurricane kit is 90% peanut butter. I don't know.
And animal crackers too.
And Nutella. Don't think.
And then of course, if you've got a generator, which I'm sure most of you do, some fuel for that. And you want to place that fuel away from anything combustible.
I'm Chief Certified Meteorologist Chris Martinez, and I'm here with Mary Blakeney with the Palm Beach County Emergency Management's Office. What do you need to have in your disaster preparedness kit?
You should have a 3 to 5 day supply of items within your disaster supply kit. You want to have personal hygiene items, including any prescription medication. You want to have non-perishable food. That's items that you can pull right out of your pantry and eat right out of the can if necessary. Remember a can opener.
And how many days of food?
3 to 5 days supply. You want to have paper products. That way you don't have to worry about doing any type of dishes. You should have a supply of cash on hand, medical information, as well as emergency contacts. When it comes to drinking water, you want to have 1 gallon per person per day. Again, 3 to 5 days. Don't forget the infants and children and the pets. And you want to also have a supply of activities for the children to have available. And everything you have in your kit should be battery operated. No candles. You want to have everything battery operated. So you can buy battery operated candles, extra batteries, a battery operated radio, and then some basic tools in the event you may need to do a last minute repair in your home.
You're going to see a lot of forecasts come out, and we don't want you to be glued to the models because we use those as guidance. But remember, whatever the forecast says, it only takes one storm, and that's what we want you to take away from today is be prepared, because we rather be prepared for a storm and nothing happened, but we want you to be prepared. Look what happened with Ian on the southwest coast. We had 2 indirect impacts with Ian, moved over Okeechobee and parts of St. Lucie, and we had Nicole, and you saw the biggest impacts. We had storm surge with Nicole. So we want you to prepare. That's why we're doing this, to get you hurricane ready, and it only takes one storm. And we thank you for your trust, and thank you for making us South Florida's #1 weather team.